Picture this. It's 1983. Over 100 million Americans are sitting in front of their televisions, not for a Super Bowl, not for a presidential address, but for the finale of a sitcom set in a war that ended 30 years earlier. That number still holds the record as the most watched television broadcast in American history. And the show? MASH. A series that began as a quirky anti-war comedy and slowly became something far more powerful, a mirror held up to the cost of human conflict, one surgical tent at a time. But here's what nobody talks about when they celebrate MASH. The show almost didn't survive its own cast. Over 11 seasons, some of its most beloved stars quietly walked out, slammed doors, or simply vanished between episodes. And the reasons behind each exit are far more complicated than most fans ever knew. Personal ambition, creative frustration, emotional collapse, secret handshake contracts, a death scene so shocking it generated thousands of angry letters overnight. What you're about to hear isn't the sanitized highlight reel version of MASH history, it's the full story. The arguments behind closed doors, the regrets that followed, and the strange truth that sometimes the people who left a show made it legendary by leaving. Before there was a television show, before there was even a film, there was a novel. In 1968, a Korean War surgeon named H. Richard Hornberger published a fictionalized account of his time working in a mobile army surgical hospital. He wrote it under the pen name Richard Hooker, and he called it MASH. The book mixed gallows humor with raw human warmth, a combination that felt almost reckless at the time. 2 years later, director Robert Altman brought it to the big screen. The 1970 film starred Donald Sutherland as Hawkeye Pierce and Elliot Gould as Trapper John, won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and took home the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. But the real explosion was still 2 years away. When CBS adapted MASH into a weekly television series, they handed the creative reins to writer Larry Gelbart and producer Gene Reynolds. Alan Alda stepped into the role of Hawkeye Pierce, and from the first episode it was clear this wasn't going to be a conventional sitcom. MASH debuted on September 17, 1972, and immediately broke rules. One of the first American comedies to regularly ditch the laugh track, use real war footage, and let stories end badly. The first season nearly got it cancelled, but CBS moved it to Saturday night, viewership soared, and slowly, episode by episode, MASH stopped being just a show and started being something closer to a cultural institution. As Alda grew into a writer and director as well as the lead actor, his Hawkeye Pierce became the moral conscience of the entire series. And that's where the tension started, because as MASH got deeper and more demanding, not everyone on that set was willing to follow it there. If you ask long-time MASH fans what moment hit them hardest, most won't point to a heartfelt speech or a romantic subplot. They'll point to a single line delivered quietly in the middle of a busy operating room. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. There were no survivors. No dramatic music, no slow fade, just radar standing in the doorway, hat in hand, while every face in that room went completely still. That moment happened because McLean Stevenson decided to leave. McLean had been there from the beginning. His Henry Blake was essential to the early DNA of the show, a commanding officer who was lovably incompetent in almost every way except the ones that mattered. He played him with effortless charm that earned him a Golden Globe and the genuine affection of millions. But as Alda's creative influence grew, the spotlight drifted towards Hawkeye, and Henry Blake quietly went from co-lead to supporting character. In a 1975 interview with People magazine, McLean was direct about it. He said he wanted to be the guy carrying the show. He wanted to be number one. So at the end of season 3, he told the producers he wasn't coming back. What they did with his exit changed television. Instead of the gentle send-off most shows would have written, Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds chose something brutal and honest. Abyssinia Henry played like a warm farewell for 25 minutes. Discharge papers, hugs, celebration, the promise of home. And then Radar walked in. Only Gary Berghoff knew what the final scene contained. The rest of the cast found out on the day of filming, which meant every devastated face in that final take was genuine. The reaction when it aired was immediate. Thousands of letters, some praising the honesty, others furious. Gelbart defended it simply. He said they wanted to say that not everybody gets to go home. The bitter irony is what came after. Wayne Rogers signed with NBC and launched the McLean-Stevenson show. One season, then cancelled. Hello Larry followed and fared even worse. By 1983, he was giving interviews where he admitted plainly that he had taken himself out of the game. He'd held lightning in a bottle and opened his hand. He passed away in 1996 at 82, and the role he'd walked away from to find something bigger remains the most enduring thing he ever did. Wayne Rogers' exit was quieter, stranger, and in some ways more revealing. As Trapper John McIntyre, he and Older had been electric together. Rapid-fire chemistry, mischief, the kind of easy partnership audiences fall in love with immediately. But Wayne had joined MASH expecting a genuine ensemble, and what he got instead was a show increasingly built around one character. Trapper John had gone, in his own words, from one half of a duo to the man who nodded at everything Hawkeye said. Here's the unusual part. Wayne had never formally signed his contract. The entire arrangement was a handshake deal. So when he told the producers he was done after season 3 and they threatened legal action, his response was simple. What contract? There was nothing enforceable. He hadn't broken any agreement. He had simply decided not to continue an informal arrangement that no longer served him. The producers had no footing. Wayne walked. The writers opened season 4 with a quick explanation. Trapper had been discharged while Hawkeye was on leave. And that was it. No goodbye scene, no farewell. Viewers who had already lost Henry Blake now lost Trapper John without even a wave. Mike Farrell stepped in as BJ Honeycutt, and the show ultimately grew stronger for the change. BJ brought emotional depth that pushed MASH in a more contemplative direction. Wayne, meanwhile, built a second career in finance, a Princeton-educated mind that Wall Street suited far better than a shrinking television role. By the 1990s, he was a regular panelist on Fox News' Cashing In. He made serious money and seemed genuinely unbothered by how things had turned out. When he passed away in 2015 at 82, Older wrote that they had made a pact to give each other a hard time for the rest of their lives, and that he was sorry they wouldn't get the chance to keep it. Gary Berghoff's departure wasn't about ambition or contract disputes, it was about what the show had quietly cost him. As Radar O'Reilly, wide-eyed, soft-voiced, teddy bear in hand, Gary was the emotional soul of the 4077th. He was also the only television cast member who had appeared in the original 1970 film, the one constant thread connecting every version of MASH. But behind that gentle performance was an actor slowly unraveling. The production schedule was brutal. Gary had been fighting anxiety and depression for years, conditions nobody in Hollywood talked about in the 1970s. He had a young daughter growing up at home while he spent weeks on a soundstage, and he later described missing her early years as a mistake he never stopped regretting. There were contractual negotiations, better pay, more flexibility, fewer appearances. The producers adjusted his schedule, tried to build in breathing room, but no adjustment was going to fix what was really happening. Gary was emotionally done, and he left at the end of season 8. This time, the show gave him the send-off he deserved, a 2-part episode called Goodbye Radar, ending with an image that became one of the most iconic in the series. Radar walking away, silhouetted against the Korean sky, his teddy bear left behind on Hawkeye's bunk. Not taken with him, left behind. The part of himself that had needed that comfort was staying. He was walking away as someone slightly older and finally ready to live his own life.
After MASH, Gary stepped back almost entirely, painting, wildlife conservation, and inventing, holding multiple patents, including one for a specialized fishing tackle system. He left, he said, for 2 reasons: his family and burnout. He wanted to pick up the pieces of his life.
Larry Linville played Major Frank Burns for 5 seasons, the show's designated villain, the man audiences loved to despise. Petty, sycophantic, insecure beneath all that bluster. Larry played him with total commitment, but as MASH matured and other characters developed real complexity, Frank stayed frozen. He was still the same man he'd been in season 1. Same prejudices, same anxieties, same limitations. Larry recognized it before anyone else did. He was a capable actor with far more range than the role required, and he was watching the show grow around a character that couldn't grow with it. At the end of season 5, he chose not to renew. No drama, no feud, just a clear-eyed decision that he'd taken Frank as far as Frank could go. His exit forced the show to mature in ways it might not have otherwise. Without a cartoon villain to lean on, MASH had to find its conflict in something more honest. Larry went on to work steadily after the show, but never found another role that left the same mark. He passed away in 2000. The character brought in to fill that creative space couldn't have been more different. Charles Emerson Winchester III arrived in season 6 like a man who had taken a very wrong turn on his way to a Boston symphony. Cultured, arrogant, professionally brilliant, and played by David Ogden Stiers with extraordinary restraint. Where Frank's awfulness had been small and self-serving, Winchester's was grand and principled. And unlike Frank, Winchester was allowed to evolve. David found the cracks in the facade from the beginning, the moments where certainty flickered, where brilliance couldn't fix what was in front of him, where war stripped away the armor of refinement one layer at a time. He stayed for the full run of the show, and his final scene in the series finale remains one of the most quietly devastating moments in television history. Winchester teaching Chinese prisoners of war to play Mozart, and then watching the instruments destroyed in a shelling, his face holding something that no rehearsal could have manufactured. When the chance to join the spin-off after MASH came up, David declined. Winchester had said what he needed to say. He went on to voice work for Disney and continued acting steadily, keeping his personal life largely private throughout. In 2009, he gave an interview in which he discussed his sexuality openly for the first time, describing himself as very proud of who he was. He had stayed quiet earlier out of genuine concern it might cost him work. A real calculation in that era, not shame. He had lived on his own terms and told his story when he was ready. David Ogden Stiers passed away in March 2018 at the age of 75, and the tributes that followed reflected both the quality of his work and the quiet courage of the life he had chosen to live. While men came and went from that set, chasing other careers, burning out, walking away from contracts that no longer suited them, Loretta Swit never left. She played Major Margaret Houlihan for all 11 seasons, one of only 4 actors to appear in both the pilot and the finale. When MASH began, Margaret was the punchline. Her nickname said everything. Hot Lips, a gag lifted from the original film. Loretta refused to leave her there. Season by season, she pushed for storylines that gave Margaret intelligence and weight. She brought emotional specificity to scenes that could have been played broadly. And over 11 seasons, she built a character the early episodes never imagined. A decorated officer, a skilled head nurse, a woman navigating a male world with precision and quiet fury. She once described her goals simply. She wanted Margaret to be a woman of substance. After 11 seasons, that's exactly what Margaret was. MASH ran for 11 seasons and ended as the most-watched television broadcast in American history. McLean Stevenson left chasing a dream that never arrived and gave the show its most shocking moment. Wayne Rogers walked through a contractual loophole and built an entirely different life. Gary Berghoff gave everything Radar had, felt the cost of it, and chose his family. Larry Linville recognized when a character had nothing left to offer and made space for something better. David Ogden Stiers stayed until the very end, said everything his character needed to say, and then quietly moved on. And Loretta Swit never left at all, because she had a job to finish. What MASH understood, more than almost any other show in television history, is that departure isn't failure. The 4077th was always temporary. The show knew that, the characters knew that, the actors, in their own ways, knew it too. The helicopters always brought new people in, and eventually, everyone went home. Tell us in the comments which departure hit you hardest. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next.